I am carrying the Alpha's heir.
The blood oath was broken the moment Esperanza carried life within her, and every wolf in the Monte Claro pack could smell the forbidden truth. Luna Catalina stood at the granite altar, her hands trembling as she read the royal decree that would shatter everything she'd built. 300 Omegas under her protection. 15 years of sanctuary. One rule that had never been violated: no Omega bears the Alpha's child. The parchment crumbled in her fists as she stared at the name written in crimson ink. Esperanza de los Santos. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug, because what happens next will break your heart the same way it broke mine. The morning had begun like any other. Catalina walked through the Omega quarters at dawn, checking on her charges, ensuring their safety within the stone walls of the Luna house. But the scent hit her before she reached Esperanza's chamber. That unmistakable sweetness of new life mixed with something else, something that made every instinct scream danger. Alpha blood. Not just any alpha. His blood. She found Esperanza huddled in the corner, her copper hair matted with sweat, one hand pressed against her still flat stomach. The girl was barely 19, brought to the sanctuary 8 months ago after her village was raided. Catalina had promised her protection, had sworn on pack law that no harm would come to her within these walls. "Luna," Esperanza whispered, her amber eyes wide with terror. I never meant." "How long?" Catalina's voice came out sharper than intended. 6 weeks. Maybe 7. Tears carved paths through the dust on Esperanza's cheeks. "He came during the Harvest Moon Festival. I didn't know who he was. He wore common clothes, spoke like a merchant's son. By the time I realized..." She broke off sobbing. Catalina's mind raced through possibilities, through escape routes and lies she could tell. But pack law was absolute. An Omega bearing the heir to the throne wasn't just forbidden, it was treason against the bloodline, punishable by exile for both Mother and Luna. The Alpha Council would demand answers. Would demand blood. "Does anyone else know?" "Marcelina. She found me sick 3 mornings ago." She swore silence, but Luna. Esperanza grabbed Catalina's sleeve. "The Alpha himself doesn't know. Was one night. One mistake in the darkness. How could I have known his scent when he masked it with merchants' oils? One night. One moment of connection in a world that had shown Esperanza nothing but cruelty. And now that moment would destroy them both." Catalina pulled the girl to her feet. "Listen to me very carefully. We have perhaps 2 days before the change in your scent becomes obvious to everyone in the pack. I need to think. I need to find a way." The bell tower erupted in urgent clangs. 3 short, 2 long. The pattern that meant only one thing. The Alpha was coming to Luna House. They never had those 2 days. Alpha Rodrigo de Valorosa arrived within the hour, his silver-trimmed cloak billowing behind him as he strode through the sanctuary gates with 4 council members flanking him. He was everything the old stories promised. Tall and commanding, with dark hair that fell to his shoulders and eyes the color of storm clouds. At 28, he'd ruled the Monte Claro pack for 6 years with an iron fist wrapped in silk diplomacy. Catalina met him in the central courtyard, her spine straight despite the fear clawing at her throat. Behind her, 300 Omegas watched from windows and doorways. They'd learned to read their Luna's moods, and they could see the tension radiating from her like heat. "Luna Catalina." Rodrigo's voice carried across the stones. "The council has received disturbing information. We're told that one of your Omegas carries a child of Alpha blood. A child that violates pack law and the sacred boundaries of your sanctuary." The courtyard fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "My Lord Alpha, all Omegas under my protection remain unmated and childless, as our covenant demands." The lie tasted like ash on Catalina's tongue, but she held his gaze steadily. "Perhaps your information is mistaken." Rodrigo's jaw tightened. "The report came from within your own walls, Luna. From an Omega named Marcelina de Torres." Betrayal hit Catalina like a physical blow. Marcelina, sweet, quiet Marcelina who'd been with the sanctuary for 4 years, who Catalina had personally rescued from an arranged mating, had sold them out. Sold Esperanza out. But why? Bring forward the Omega Esperanza de los Santos, Counselor Vicente commanded. His ancient face creased with barely concealed satisfaction. He'd opposed Catalina's appointment as Luna from the beginning. Had argued that a woman who'd never borne children herself couldn't properly protect Omegas. This was his vindication. Catalina's mind spun through options. She could deny Esperanza was here. Could claim the girl had fled in the night. Esperanza stepped forward from the crowd of watching Omegas. Her chin lifted in defiance even as her hands shook. I am Esperanza de los Santos. Rodrigo's nostrils flared as he caught her scent, and Catalina watched his expression shift from commanding authority to genuine shock. He moved closer to Esperanza, studying her face with an intensity that made the girl flinch. You, he breathed. The girl from the festival. The one who talked about stars and old songs. You said your name was. I said my name was Sol. Esperanza's voice cracked. Because I didn't want to be Esperanza anymore. Didn't want to be the broken Omega from a burned village. For one night, I wanted to be someone who looked at stars instead of at the ground. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Rodrigo's hand rose as if to touch her face, then fell back to his side. You're carrying my child. Not a question. A statement of devastating fact. I didn't know who you were, Esperanza said quietly. You smelled like cedarwood and rain. You laughed at my jokes. You were kind. How was I supposed to know you were the alpha who'd ordered the raid that killed my family? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Counselor Vicente seized the moment. His reedy voice cutting through the tension. Pack law is clear. An Omega who bears an alpha's child outside the mating bond brings shame upon both bloodlines. The Luna who allowed this betrayal must be stripped of her position. The Omega must be exiled beyond our territories. The child is the heir to my throne, Rodrigo interrupted. His voice deadly quiet. Whatever else this situation entails, that fact is inarguable. My blood runs in that child's veins. Bastard blood, Vicente spat. Omega blood mixed with alpha. An abomination that could tear the pack structure apart. My lord, you have legitimate heirs to consider. Your mate, Lady Isabella, is barren. The words dropped like stones. As everyone in this courtyard well knows, though we pretend otherwise. 7 years of mating bonds and not a single conception. The pack needs an heir. Now I have one. Catalina watched the council members exchange glances. This changed everything. A bastard heir was still an heir, and with no legitimate alternative, Esperanza's child suddenly became the most valuable life in the territory. And the most dangerous. The law must still be upheld, Counselor Tomas interjected. His tone more measured than Vicente's but equally firm. The Luna's sanctuary exists because she swore to keep Omegas safe from precisely this kind of complication. I did keep her safe, Catalina said, her voice rising. Every Omega who enters these walls leaves behind the violence and forced matings of the outer packs. Esperanza came to me 8 months ago, traumatized and half-starved, and I gave her food and shelter and peace. What happened at your harvest festival, my Lord Alpha, happened outside my walls and without my knowledge. You cannot hold me accountable for a connection made in secret, disguised by your own deception. Rodrigo's eyes snapped to hers, and for a moment she saw genuine conflict there. The Alpha who needed an heir warring with a ruler who'd established the very laws now being broken. The Luna speaks truth, he said finally. I attended the festival in common dress specifically to avoid the formality of my position. If Esperanza didn't know who I was, the fault lies with my own choice to hide my identity. Then the Alpha himself has violated pack law, Vicente declared triumphantly. By mating with an Omega under false pretenses, by creating an heir outside the proper channels, you've undermined the very structure you swore to uphold. The Council demands. The council demands nothing. Rodrigo's power rolled through the courtyard like thunder, making every Omega drop their gaze. I am Alpha. My word is law. And I say that Esperanza de los Santos will be brought into my household as a protected consort until the child is born. Esperanza made a sound of pure panic. No, I won't go back to. I can't, Luna, please. She reached for Catalina, who caught her hands instinctively. This was the moment. The choice that would define everything that followed. Stand with her Omega and defy the Alpha, or step aside and let pack law consume the girl she'd sworn to protect. She stays here, Catalina heard herself say. Under my protection, as she has been since the day she arrived. If you want her moved, my lord, you'll have to remove me as Luna first. The courtyard erupted in whispers. 300 Omegas pressed closer, forming a living wall behind their Luna. It was unprecedented. Omegas never challenged Alphas, never inserted themselves into pack politics. But Catalina had built something different here. Had taught them that protection meant standing together. Rodrigo's expression darkened. You're forcing my hand, Luna. You forced mine the moment you bedded an Omega under my care without revealing your identity, Catalina shot back. You want pack law upheld. Then uphold all of it. The Sanctuary Charter states that no Omega can be removed from Luna House without their explicit consent or proof of danger to the pack. Esperanza consents to nothing. And the only danger here is the one you've created. The child is danger enough, Vicente insisted. An Omega-born heir will fracture pack loyalty. Half the Alphas will refuse to follow a leader with diluted blood. Civil war will. Then perhaps our pack structure is the problem, Catalina interrupted. Perhaps a system that values bloodline over character, that treats Omegas as breeding vessels instead of people, that forces girls like Esperanza to flee their homes. Perhaps that system deserves to fracture. The words were sedition. Open rebellion against the hierarchies that had governed wolf packs for centuries. Catalina knew it even as she spoke, knew she was signing her own exile order. But looking at Esperanza's terrified face, at the 300 Omegas who'd found safety in her sanctuary, she couldn't bring herself to care. Rodrigo stepped closer, his voice dropping to a tone only she could hear. You're asking me to choose between you and the stability of my pack, Luna. Don't make me destroy you to save everything else. I'm asking you to choose between your child and your pride, Catalina replied just as quietly. Because that's what this is really about. You're ashamed that your heir comes from an Omega you met in the dark. That you felt something real for a girl you're supposed to see as lesser. And that shame is going to cost Esperanza everything if you let it. She watched the truth of her words land, watched him flinch almost imperceptibly. Then his mask of authority slammed back into place. The council will convene at sunset to determine appropriate consequences for this breach of pack law. Until then, Esperanza de los Santos remains confined to Luna House under guard. No one enters or leaves these grounds. Luna Catalina, you are hereby stripped of your authority pending investigation into your failure to maintain the sanctuary covenant. The formal words fell like a death sentence. Around them, Omegas began to cry, their distress scenting the air with fear and confusion. Who will protect them? Catalina demanded. Who will stand between your guards and these women if I'm not Luna anymore? Rodrigo's expression remained carved from stone. Perhaps they should have considered that before standing with you against their alpha. He turned and strode toward the gates, his council members following like crows behind a storm. The moment they disappeared, Esperanza collapsed in Catalina's arms, her whole body shaking with silent sobs. I've destroyed everything, the girl whispered. You, the sanctuary, all of them, because I was foolish enough to believe one night could be different. Catalina held her tighter, aware of the hundreds of eyes watching them. You didn't destroy anything, Mija. You just revealed the cracks that were already there. But later, alone in her chambers as the sun bled red across the horizon, Catalina let herself acknowledge the truth. Everything was about to get much, much worse. The guards arrived as darkness fell. 20 Alpha warriors led by Commander Felipe, a grizzled veteran who'd served the pack for 4 decades. He'd always been respectful to Catalina before, had even defended her appointment as Luna when others questioned it. Now his face was expressionless as he posted sentries at every entrance to the sanctuary. "I'm sorry, Luna," he said quietly as she watched from the courtyard. "Orders are orders." "When did orders become more important than what's right, Felipe?" His jaw worked. "When the alternative was chaos. You've put us all in an impossible position." Catalina wanted to argue, to point out that Rodrigo had created this impossible position by disguising himself and pursuing an Omega he had no right to touch. But she bit back the words. Felipe was just a soldier following commands. The real battle would come at sunset with the council. She spent the remaining hours preparing the Omegas, gathered them in the Great Hall and explained what was likely to happen. Her removal as Luna, possible restructuring of the sanctuary, uncertainty about whether their protections would remain. "We won't let them take you," Mariana declared, her voice fierce despite her small stature. She was one of the oldest Omegas in the sanctuary, barely 22 but hardened by years of abuse before Catalina found her. "We'll fight if we have to." "No." Catalina's voice was firm. "No fighting. That's exactly what the council wants. Proof that Omegas can't govern themselves, that we need Alpha authority to maintain order. We stay calm. We stay together. And we trust that the truth will matter." Even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. Esperanza had been moved to the medical wing under Catalina's orders, where old Doctora Jimena could monitor her condition. The pregnancy was still early, still fragile. The stress alone could end it before any council decision mattered. If she cannot maintain that sacred duty, she cannot remain Luna. Part of Catalina wondered if that would be easier. If losing the child would solve everything, would let them return to the careful balance they'd maintained before. Then she hated herself for the thought. Every child deserved a chance at life, regardless of how or why they were conceived. The summons came as the first stars appeared. Catalina was to present herself to the council chamber in the Alpha's compound immediately. Alone. She dressed carefully in the formal robes of her position, silver and white with a crescent moon emblem of Luna House embroidered across the shoulders. If they were going to strip her of her title, she'd make them do it while she wore every symbol of what she'd built. The walk to the compound took 20 minutes through winding stone paths. Guards flanked her on either side, their presence both protection and threat. She noticed Omegas watching from windows, saw the way they pressed hands to the glass as she passed. Their faith in her was a weight she carried like stones. The council chamber was exactly as she remembered, a circular room with high vaulted ceilings and walls lined with the banners of prominent pack families. 12 council members sat in their designated seats, with Alpha Rodrigo on a raised throne at the center. His mate, Lady Isabella, sat to his right in a chair only slightly less ornate than his own. Catalina had met Isabella a handful of times over the years. The woman was beautiful in a cold, precise way. Dark hair always perfectly arranged, posture rigid, expression giving nothing away. She'd been chosen as Rodrigo's mate when he was barely 20, a political alliance between powerful families. 7 years later, they occupied the same space like courteous strangers. Now Isabella's green eyes fixed on Catalina with something that might have been sympathy or satisfaction. It was impossible to tell. Luna Catalina de Montañez, Counselor Vicente began, reading from a scroll. "You stand accused of negligence in your duties as protector of Omega Sanctuary. Specifically, you failed to prevent an illicit connection between one of your charges and the Alpha himself, resulting in a pregnancy that violates pack law and threatens the stability of our bloodlines. How do you answer these charges?" Catalina took a breath, centering herself. "I answer that I fulfilled every duty of my position. I provided safety, sustenance, and guidance to every Omega under my care. What happened between Esperanza de los Santos and Alpha Rodrigo occurred outside my walls, outside my knowledge, and outside any authority I possess to control. You cannot hold me accountable for the Alpha's private choices. The Alpha was unaware the girl was under sanctuary protection, Tomas countered. Because he didn't ask. Because he approached her in disguise, pursuing connection without consideration for pack law or sanctuary boundaries. If there's negligence here, it's his. A ripple of shock went through the chamber. No one openly accused the Alpha of negligence. It simply wasn't done. Rodrigo leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Are you claiming I acted improperly, Luna? I'm claiming we both acted according to our natures, my lord. You saw someone who interested you and pursued her. I provided protection to an Omega in need. Neither of us foresaw this outcome. The difference is that only one of us is being held responsible for it. Because only one of us swore an oath to prevent precisely this situation, Vicente snapped. Your sanctuary exists because you promised that no Omega under your care would become entangled with Alphas. That promise is now broken. Then perhaps the promise itself was flawed, Catalina said. You asked me to prevent Omegas from forming connections with Alphas while simultaneously expecting them to eventually leave the sanctuary and integrate into pack life. You wanted me to create an impossible bubble where attraction and feeling simply don't exist. I'm Luna, not a miracle worker. You're an Omega who was given extraordinary authority. Isabella spoke for the first time, her voice soft but cutting. And you've used that authority to build a pocket kingdom where pack hierarchy doesn't apply. Perhaps this crisis is the inevitable result of disrupting natural order. The words stung because they echoed doubts Catalina had wrestled with herself, whether creating the sanctuary had been an act of protection or of pride, whether teaching Omegas to value themselves had been empowerment or dangerous idealism. The natural order, my lady, is that the strong protect the weak, Catalina replied carefully. That's what I've tried to do. If that's disruption, I'm guilty as charged. Rodrigo stood, and the room fell silent. The council will deliberate on Luna Catalina's fate. However, there's another matter that requires immediate resolution. The question of what happens to Esperanza de los Santos and the child she carries. This was the real trial. Catalina was just the warm-up. Pack law demands exile for an Omega who bears an Alpha's child outside proper mating bonds, Vicente said. The precedent is clear and ancient. To ignore it now would undermine every tradition we hold sacred. The child is my heir, Rodrigo stated flatly. Exiling its mother means exiling my succession. I won't allow that. Then legitimize the connection, Tomas suggested. Break your current mating bond and take Esperanza as your official mate. That would satisfy pack law and secure the child's status. Isabella's expression didn't change, but Catalina saw her hands tighten on the arms of her chair. 7 years of marriage dismissed with a suggestion. Impossible, Rodrigo said, though his tone suggested he'd already considered the option. Isabella's family holds too much political power. Breaking our mating bond would fracture alliance structures throughout the region. It would cause more damage than this pregnancy. So Isabella was safe, not because he loved her but because she was useful. The lady's expression revealed nothing, but Catalina wondered what it cost to sit there and hear your value reduced to political calculation. There is another solution, a new voice spoke. Catalina turned to see Councillor Dolores, one of the few women on the council, rise to her feet. She was old, nearly 70, with silver hair and eyes that had witnessed 6 decades of pack politics. Speak, Councillor, Rodrigo said. The child need not be legitimate to be claimed as heir. Bastard children have inherited thrones before when no alternative existed. What we need is not to legitimize Esperanza's position, but to formalize her role as mother of the heir. She becomes neither mate nor exile, but something in between, a protected consort whose only duty is to carry and raise the Alpha's child. Vicente scoffed. That's essentially making the Omega royalty without title. The pack will never accept. The pack will accept what we tell them to accept, Dolores cut him off. Especially if we frame it correctly. The Alpha, in his wisdom, chose to ensure the bloodline's continuation by connecting with a strong Omega who could bear healthy offspring. Lady Isabella remains his mate and our social leader. Esperanza becomes a sacred responsibility, a vessel for the heir. Catalina's stomach turned at the phrasing, but she saw the political genius in it. By reducing Esperanza to a function rather than a person, they stripped away the romantic implications that threatened Isabella's position. The girl became a tool, not a rival. Where would this sacred vessel reside? Isabella asked, her voice acid. Luna House, Dolores said immediately. Under Catalina's protection, as she is now. This actually solves multiple problems. It keeps the Omega away from the main compound, preventing social awkwardness, while ensuring she has the support structure she needs. The Luna continues her duties, though perhaps with additional oversight to prevent future incidents. You're suggesting we reward failure, Vicente protested. I'm suggesting we contain it, Dolores corrected. Right now, this crisis threatens to explode in multiple directions. My proposal keeps everyone in their proper place while securing the heir's safety. Luna Catalina clearly has the loyalty of her Omegas. We saw that today when they rallied around her. Better to harness that loyalty for the heir's protection than to fight it. The logic was cold and calculating, but Catalina couldn't deny it offered a path forward that didn't end in exile or execution. She glanced at Rodrigo, trying to read his reaction. He was looking at Isabella, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, the lady gave an almost imperceptible nod. Very well, Rodrigo announced. We'll implement Councillor Dolores's proposal with the following conditions. Luna Catalina retains her position but operates under council supervision. Monthly reports on all sanctuary activities. Esperanza de los Santos remains at Luna House but with understanding that she carries the heir to the throne. Any threat to that child is treason. And his eyes locked on Catalina. No more secrets. If anything happens that affects the heir's safety, you report it immediately. Any hesitation will be considered conspiracy against the pack. The terms were barely better than prison, but they were terms Catalina could work with. She bowed her head. Understood, my Lord Alpha. There's one more condition, Isabella spoke up, surprising everyone. I want regular visits with the child once it's born. If this Omega is raising my mate's heir, I'll have a hand in that upbringing. The child will know both mothers, the one who birthed them and the one who holds their father's heart. The jab was subtle but sharp. Catalina saw Esperanza didn't hold Rodrigo's heart, making the girl's position even more precarious. Rodrigo nodded. Agreed. Are there objections? Vicente looked like he wanted to object to everything, but even he could see the political brilliance of the compromise. One by one, council members voiced their acceptance. Then it's settled, Rodrigo declared. Luna Catalina, you may return to your duties. Commander Felipe will receive revised orders regarding Luna House security. The guards remain, but they're there for protection now, not imprisonment. See that you earn this second chance. Catalina bowed again and turned to leave, but Rodrigo's voice stopped her. Luna. A word in private. The council members filed out, Isabella's footsteps echoing a little too sharply on the stone floor. Soon only Rodrigo and Catalina remained in the vast chamber. He descended from his throne, approaching her with none of the formal distance he'd maintained during the trial. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. You think I'm a coward, he said quietly. For not choosing her. For not breaking the mating bond and making Esperanza my legitimate mate. I think you're a politician, Catalina replied. And politics requires sacrifices. I didn't mean for this to happen. I went to that festival because I was tired of being alpha for one night. Tired of people looking at me and seeing only my title. She talked to me about stars, about the songs her grandmother used to sing. She made me laugh. It felt human. And now she gets to be a vessel for your heir while your actual mate pretends this is all fine. Very human. Rodrigo's expression hardened. You don't know what you're talking about, Isabella and I have an understanding. We're partners in governing, not lovers. This arrangement suits her as much as it suits me. Does Esperanza get an arrangement that suits her? Or does she just get to exist as a problem you've solved? She gets to be mother to the future Alpha, Rodrigo snapped. That's more than most Omegas can dream of. She dreamed of a kind man who looked at stars with her. Instead she got this nightmare. Congratulations on lowering the bar so far that survival counts as a gift. They stared at each other, the anger between them crackling like lightning. Finally Rodrigo turned away. Protect her, he said, his voice rough. Not for me. Not for the heir. For her. Because you were right earlier, I am ashamed. Ashamed that I felt more real with her in one night than I have in 7 years of a political marriage. Ashamed that I'm too much of a coward to choose her over stability. Just protect her from all of this. From me. From the pack. From whatever's coming. The vulnerability caught Catalina off guard. She'd expected continued authority, maybe threats. Not this raw confession. I will, she said quietly. But Rodrigo, you need to understand something. That night you had with her. That feeling of being human. She felt it too. And when you reduce her to a vessel, to a sacred responsibility, you kill that part of her that believed one night could be different. You turn her cynicism true. She left before he could respond, walking through the empty corridors of the compound with his words echoing in her mind. Whatever's coming. As if things could somehow get worse than this. She was wrong. Catalina returned to Luna House near midnight to find chaos. Omegas crowded in the courtyard, their voices raised in argument. She pushed through to find Marcelina, the Omega who'd betrayed Esperanza, standing on the central fountain with blood streaming from a cut above her eye. I did what I had to do. Marcelina was shouting. You all think the Luna is so perfect that she can protect us from everything. But she can't. The council was going to find out anyway. I just made sure. You sold out one of our own for silver, Mariana yelled back. Esperanza trusted you. Esperanza was stupid. She brought this danger into our sanctuary. If the Alpha's heir is born here, we become a target. Every power-hungry pack member who wants to control the succession will come for us. Marcelina pointed at the looming guards. Look around. We're already prisoners. Catalina's voice cut through the commotion like a blade. Enough. Silence fell. Every Omega turned to face their Luna. Marcelina stepped down. Now. The girl hesitated, then climbed off the fountain, her expression defiant despite the obvious fear in her eyes. Catalina approached her slowly, aware that 300 Omegas were watching how she handled this betrayal. You went to the council, Catalina said quietly. You revealed Esperanza's secret and nearly destroyed everything we've built here. Why? Because you were going to lie, Marcelina shot back. I heard you that morning planning how to hide it. And I thought if they found out we'd lied, they'd burn the whole sanctuary down. At least if I told them first, if I showed them we weren't all complicit. You thought you'd save yourself at Esperanza's expense. Tears started down Marcelina's face, mixing with the blood. I thought I'd save all of us. I thought you were being selfish, protecting one Omega at the cost of hundreds. Was I wrong? You nearly lost your position today. We nearly lost everything. And for what? For a girl who couldn't keep her legs closed at a festival. The slap rang out before Catalina consciously decided to deliver it. Marcelina's head snapped to the side, and the courtyard gasped. Catalina rarely used physical discipline. Had built the sanctuary on principles of respect and autonomy. But hearing Esperanza reduced to a crude insult, hearing this frightened girl justify betrayal as protection, something snapped. You're right about one thing, Catalina said, her voice deadly calm. I would have lied to protect Esperanza. I would have burned this sanctuary to the ground before I let the council use her as a political pawn. Because that's what it means to protect someone, Marcelina. Not calculated betrayal disguised as pragmatism. Not throwing others to the wolves to save your own skin. Real protection means standing between the danger and the person who needs you, even when it costs everything. Easy for you to say, Marcelina spat. You're Luna. You have power, position. I'm just an Omega who watched her entire family slaughtered because they couldn't pay protection tribute. I know what happens when you can't give powerful people what they want. They take everything else instead. The truth of it hung in the air. This wasn't really about Esperanza at all. It was about a traumatized girl doing what she'd learned to do to survive, sacrificing others before she could be sacrificed herself. Catalina's anger cooled into something more complex. I'm not sending you away, she said finally. Even though you betrayed us. Even though you caused this crisis. 'Cause that's not how we work here. But you're going to face what you did. You're going to look Esperanza in the eye and explain why you thought her suffering was worth your safety. And then you're going to help protect her and that child like your life depends on it. 'Cause it does. We all rise or fall together now. She turned to address the full crowd of Omegas. Listen to me, all of you. Everything has changed. The council knows about the heir. Esperanza is staying here under our protection, but we're being watched. Any mistake, any hint of threat to that child, and they'll have an excuse to dismantle everything we've built. So we need to be smarter, stronger, more unified than ever before. How? Someone called from the back. How do we protect an alpha's heir when we can barely protect ourselves? By remembering that an heir is still a child, Catalina said. Still an innocent life that deserves safety and love. By treating Esperanza not as a vessel or a problem, but as one of our own who's going through something impossibly difficult. By being the family that none of us had when we needed it most. She saw some heads nodding, some faces still skeptical. But they were listening. That was enough for now. Get some sleep, she told them. Tomorrow we start figuring out what comes next. The crowd dispersed slowly. Omegas returning to their chambers in small groups, still whispering. Catalina watched them go, feeling the weight of the day settling into her bones. Luna. She turned to find Doctora Jimena standing in the doorway to the medical wing. Her expression grim. It's Esperanza. You need to come quickly. Catalina's heart dropped as she followed the old woman through the corridors. Please not the child. Please let them not have lost the child on top of everything else. But when she reached Esperanza's room, the girl was sitting up in bed, pale but alive. What made Catalina stop in the doorway was the woman sitting beside her. Lady Isabella, still wearing her formal council robes, her perfect posture unchanged even in the dim light of the medical chamber. Lady Isabella, Catalina said carefully. We weren't expecting. I wanted to meet her, Isabella cut her off. The mother of my mate's child. I thought it better to do so privately before the required formal visits begin. Catalina looked at Esperanza, who seemed frozen between terror and confusion. I'm not sure this is appropriate without. Without what? Without the Alpha's permission. Isabella's laugh was brittle. I don't need my mate's permission to speak with an Omega. Close the door, Luna. This conversation is private. Every instinct screamed at Catalina to refuse, to throw this woman out of her sanctuary. But Isabella was still the Alpha's mate, still held significant power. Refusing her could undo everything they'd just negotiated. Catalina closed the door but remained standing, positioned between Isabella and Esperanza like a shield. Say what you came to say, Catalina demanded. Isabella studied Esperanza for a long moment, her green eyes unreadable. You're very young, she said finally. Younger than I was when they gave me to Rodrigo. I was 20, thought I knew everything about power and politics. Turned out I knew nothing. Why are you here? Esperanza's voice was barely a whisper. To see if you love him. The question hung in the air like a drawn blade. Esperanza's eyes widened. I barely know. Good, Isabella interrupted. Because love would complicate everything. Love would make you think you had a chance at something more than this arrangement. Love would break your heart over and over as you watched him choose duty over you. Watched him come to you only when the pack needed an heir. watched him forget you exist for months at a time. Love would destroy you. Unlike what you're doing right now, Catalina said acidly. Isabella turned her sharp gaze to the Luna. I'm being kind. I'm telling her the truth instead of letting her build fantasies. My mate doesn't love me, and I've made my peace with that. We're partners in governing, nothing more. That's the arrangement that works. If this girl is smart, she'll accept a similar arrangement. Be mother to his child, take the protection and comfort that comes with that role, and never expect more. What if I want more? Esperanza asked softly. Then you're a fool, Isabella said bluntly. And you'll suffer for it. Rodrigo is alpha first, mate second, father a distant third. That child you're carrying, it will grow up knowing its father as a distant authority figure, not a loving parent. That's the price of royal blood. You seem very certain, Catalina observed. For someone who's never managed to give him children herself. The cruelty of the words shocked even Catalina, but Isabella just smiled coldly. Yes, I'm barren. 7 years of trying, of private doctors and herbal remedies and prayers to moon spirits. 7 years of failure. You know what I learned? That not being able to give him the one thing he needed most was the best thing that could have happened to me. Because it meant I wasn't replaceable as just a mother. I had to become invaluable in other ways. In politics, in alliance building, in governing. I made myself essential to the pack's functioning. That's real power, not this. She gestured at Esperanza's stomach. This is a child, Catalina said quietly. Not a political strategy. Everything is political strategy at this level, Isabella countered. And if you don't teach her that, Luna, you're setting her up for destruction. The pack will never fully accept an Omega-born heir. There will be challenges, assassination attempts, plots to replace the child with a more legitimate option. If Esperanza thinks her job is just to be a mother, she won't survive what's coming. The words were harsh but not wrong. Catalina had been thinking about safety within the sanctuary, not the larger implications of an Omega-born heir trying to take the throne someday. Then what do you suggest? Catalina asked. Isabella stood, smoothing her robes. Teach her to be strategic. To see the child not just as her baby but as a chess piece in a larger game. To protect it not through love but through cold calculation of threats and alliances. And most importantly, she looked directly at Esperanza. Teach her to never ever trust my mate's affection. Whatever kindness he showed you that night was real, I believe that. But kindness isn't enough to survive palace politics. You need to be harder than that. Martyr. More ruthless than the people who will try to destroy you. With that, she swept toward the door. Catalina opened it, and Isabella paused on the threshold. One more thing, the lady said without turning. I meant what I said in council. I will be involved in that child's upbringing. Not to undermine you, Esperanza, but to ensure my mate's heir is prepared for the throne they'll inherit. We're not enemies. We're just two women trying to survive the same impossible situation. The sooner we both accept that, the better. She left, her footsteps echoing down the corridor until silence fell. Esperanza started crying, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Catalina sat on the bed and pulled the girl into her arms, letting her weep out all the terror and confusion and grief of the past 24 hours. She's right, Esperanza gasped between sobs. About all of it. I did think that night meant something. I thought he was different. I thought maybe someone could want me for me, not for what I could give them. How stupid is that? Not stupid, Catalina murmured. Human. You're allowed to be human, Mija. But humans don't survive in this world. Vessels do. Chess pieces do. Political strategies do. I have to figure out how to be those things instead. Catalina held her tighter, hating the truth of it. Hating that Isabella was right. Love and hope were luxuries Esperanza couldn't afford. The only thing that would keep her alive now was clear-eyed understanding of her position and ruthless protection of her interests. Then we'll teach you, Catalina said. How to be strategic while staying human. How to protect yourself and your child without losing who you are. It's possible, Esperanza. Hard as hell, but possible. The girl nodded against her shoulder, her crying gradually subsiding into exhausted hiccups. Eventually, she fell asleep like that, curled against Catalina like a child seeking comfort. Catalina stayed with her through the night, watching the moon cross the sky through the chamber window. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats. But tonight, she could offer this small protection. Warmth, presence, the promise that Esperanza wouldn't face what came next alone. The weeks that followed established a new normal that was anything but normal. Esperanza's pregnancy progressed under Dr. Jimena's careful monitoring, and the changes in the girl's body became visible to everyone in the sanctuary. Her belly rounded, her face grew fuller, and her scent shifted to that unmistakable sweetness of an omega-carrying life. The guards remained at their posts, a constant reminder that Luna House was under surveillance. Commander Felipe checked in daily, his reports presumably going straight to the council. Catalina made sure everything appeared perfectly managed. Omegas going about their routines, no signs of dissent or planning, nothing that could be construed as threat to the heir. Beneath the surface, though, tension simmered. The Omegas had split into factions. Those who saw Esperanza's child as protection, if the heir was born here, surely the sanctuary would be safeguarded. Those who saw it as danger, the child made them all targets, and those who simply didn't know what to think. Marcelina kept her head down, doing the tasks assigned to her without complaint but also without connection. The other Omegas had essentially shunned her, and Catalina watched the isolation eating away at the girl's already fragile mental state. Isabella visited twice more, each time bringing subtle gifts: a blanket woven with protective symbols, a book of old lullabies, herbs that were supposed to ease pregnancy discomfort. She never stayed long, never engaged in real conversation. But her presence alone was a reminder of the complex web being woven around Esperanza's child. Rodrigo came once, in the 4th month of pregnancy. He arrived without announcement, walking through the gates at dawn when most of the sanctuary was still asleep. Catalina found him standing in the courtyard, staring up at Esperanza's window like a man trying to solve an impossible equation. "She's sleeping," Catalina told him. "Doctor's orders, she needs rest." "I know." Felipe includes her health status in his reports. Rodrigo didn't look at her, kept his eyes fixed on that window. How is she really? Not the official version. The truth. Scared. Overwhelmed. Trying to figure out how to be a mother to a child she never planned, who will live a life she can't imagine. And grieving the man she met at a festival who probably never really existed. Now he did look at her, something raw in his expression. He existed. That night he was real. Real doesn't mean sustainable, Catalina said. You can't build a life on one night of authenticity surrounded by years of duty and distance. I know. He turned back to the window. That's why I haven't tried to see her. Because what would I say? Sorry, I'm the Alpha and you're an Omega and our child will be caught between worlds forever. There's no conversation that makes this better. There's conversation that makes it survivable, Catalina corrected. You could tell her what to expect, how the succession will work, what dangers to prepare for. You could give her information instead of leaving her in the dark. Information is dangerous. The less she knows about pack politics, the safer she is. Ignorance won't protect her, Rodrigo. It'll just make her easier to manipulate when someone realizes she has no idea how to navigate court intrigue. He was quiet for a long moment. Is that what you're doing? Teaching her to navigate intrigue? I'm teaching her to survive, Catalina said. Same as I teach all my Omegas. The difference is that her survival now involves understanding power structures and political maneuvering. So yes, she's learning things most Omegas never need to know. Because her child will be Alpha someday, and she needs to be able to protect them until they're strong enough to protect themselves. Rodrigo nodded slowly. Will you give her a message for me? Say it yourself. She's probably awake by now, just staying in bed because that's what she's supposed to do. No. He shook his head. I can't. If I go up there, if I see her, I won't be Alpha anymore. I'll be the man who talked about stars. And that man can't exist here. The admission was devastating in its honesty. Catalina felt a strange sympathy for him. This powerful alpha trapped in a role that required him to sacrifice everything personal for duty. What's the message? Tell her I'm sorry. For all of it. And tell her. His voice cracked slightly. Tell her the child will be legitimate in every way that matters. I'm drafting a formal decree that names them as heir regardless of birth circumstances. No one will be able to challenge their claim based on Omega blood or lack of mating bond. Whatever else I can't give her, I can give her that certainty. It was something. Not much but something. I'll tell her. Rodrigo left as quietly as he'd arrived, and Catalina climbed the stairs to Esperanza's chamber. The girl was indeed awake, sitting by the window, one hand resting on her now prominent belly. He was here, Esperanza said without turning. I smelled him. Cedar and rain. He wanted to come up but didn't trust himself to stay alpha if he did. Translation. Duty matters more than I do. Catalina sat beside her. Yes, but he's making the child legitimate by decree, ensuring no one can challenge their right to the throne. That's not nothing. It's also not love. Not choice. Not any of the things that actually matter. Esperanza's voice was flat, resigned. Isabella was right. I need to stop thinking of him as the man from the festival and start thinking of him as the alpha who controls my fate. It's cleaner that way. Cleaner doesn't mean healthier. No, but it means survivable. And survival is all I've got left to aim for. The conversation haunted Catalina for days. Watching a 19-year-old girl systematically kill hope in herself, watching her learn to be strategic instead of genuine, it felt like failure even though it was necessary. The 5th month brought new complications. Esperanza started showing signs of early labor, contractions that came and went, spotting that terrified everyone. Doctora Jimena ordered complete bed rest, and suddenly the girl who'd been learning politics and strategy was confined to her chamber, watched constantly, her only job to keep the child safe inside her. The pressure mounted. Every day the pregnancy continued was a day closer to success, but also a day closer to whoever might try to prevent the heir's birth. Catalina increased security, had the Omegas working in rotating watch shifts, coordinated with Commander Felipe to ensure guards were positioned strategically. And then Marcelina disappeared. They noticed her absence at morning meal. Her chamber was empty, her few belongings gone. The guards swore no one had passed their posts, but somehow the girl had vanished from a locked sanctuary. Catalina's blood ran cold. Marcelina knew everything. The daily routines, the security weak points, Esperanza's exact location and condition. If she'd gone to someone hostile to the heir. We need to find her, Mariana said urgently. Before she sells us out again. She already sold us out, another Omega pointed out. What more damage can she do? She can tell them exactly when and how to strike, Catalina said grimly. She can give them everything they need to get to Esperanza and the child. She sent runners to Commander Felipe, demanded the guards search the perimeter. But in her gut, she knew they wouldn't find anything. Marcelina had planned this, had waited for the right moment when everyone was distracted by Esperanza's health crisis. The question was, who was she running to? The answer came 3 days later when a delegation arrived at Luna House. Not the Alpha or his council, but representatives from the old bloodline families, the ones who'd held power before Rodrigo's line took the throne 2 generations ago. They demanded audience with Luna Catalina regarding matters of pack security and succession. She met them in the sanctuary's formal receiving room, flanked by her most trusted Omegas. There were 5 of them, led by Lord Vicente. Yes, the same Councillor Vicente who'd been pushing for her removal. This was clearly his play. Luna Catalina. Vicente began with false courtesy. We've received disturbing information from one of your former charges. Information that suggests the heir being carried by Esperanza de los Santos may not be viable. Doctora Jimena says otherwise, Catalina countered. The child is strong and healthy. But the mother is not, Vicente pressed. She's experiencing complications, yes? Early contractions, bleeding. These are signs that the body is rejecting the pregnancy. Nature's way of purging what isn't meant to be. The implications were clear. They wanted the child to fail. We're possibly planning to help it fail. The mother is on bed rest and improving, Catalina said firmly. Any complications are being managed by skilled medical care. Nevertheless, we believe it's irresponsible to place all of the pack's succession hopes on such an uncertain pregnancy. Vicente smiled coldly. Which is why we've come with an alternative proposal. Lady Barbara of the Monte Claro bloodline is of breeding age and has expressed willingness to serve as the Alpha's formal consort. She comes from impeccable lineage, has no Omega weakness, and could provide a legitimate heir within the year. There was the real threat. Not just discrediting Esperanza's child, but replacing it entirely with an heir from the old bloodlines. If Rodrigo agreed, Esperanza and her baby became irrelevant, disposable. You're asking the Alpha to set aside his acknowledged heir before the child is even born, Catalina said carefully. That seems premature. We're asking him to have a backup plan, Vicente corrected. Surely even you can see the wisdom in that, Luna. If something were to happen to Esperanza or the child she carries, tragic accident, complications from the pregnancy, any number of unfortunate possibilities, the pack needs assurance of continued succession. The veiled threats weren't even subtle. They were all but promising that something would happen to Esperanza if their alternative wasn't accepted. I need to consult with the Alpha, Catalina said. Of course. We'll wait here. Like hell they would. Catalina had no intention of leaving these predators in her sanctuary. Commander Felipe will escort you to comfortable accommodations outside the grounds. When the Alpha makes his decision, you'll be informed. Vicente's expression soured, but he couldn't refuse without openly admitting hostile intentions. The delegation was led out by nervous guards, and the moment they were gone, Catalina ran to Esperanza's chamber. The girl was sitting up in bed, her face white. I heard. The walls are thin, and they wanted me to hear. It's an intimidation tactic, Catalina said. Rodrigo won't agree to. Why wouldn't he? Esperanza interrupted. They're offering him exactly what he needs. A legitimate heir from proper bloodlines, no complications, no Omega weakness to deal with. Why would he choose my uncertain pregnancy over their guarantee? Because he's not a monster, Catalina said, though doubt crept into her voice. Because he claimed your child as his heir. Because of one night that meant nothing in the larger scope of pack politics, Esperanza finished. Catalina, you need to stop believing that humans win over strategy. Strategy always wins. Always. Before Catalina could respond, Doctora Jimena burst into the room, her usually calm face panicked. The guards, she gasped. Commander Felipe's men. They're not at their posts. Someone pulled them away on false orders, and now there are different guards outside. Men I don't recognize, wearing old bloodline colors. The attack was already underway. Catalina's mind raced. They couldn't fight. They were Omegas in a sanctuary, not warriors. They couldn't run. Esperanza couldn't be moved in her condition. They couldn't even call for help because the guards who should have protected them were the ones mounting the assault. Barricade the door, she ordered. Now. Everything heavy you can move, block that entrance. The Omegas in the room scrambled to obey, dragging furniture against the door even as footsteps thundered in the corridor outside. They heard shouts, the sound of doors being kicked open, systematic searching of each room. They're coming chamber by chamber, Mariana whispered. Looking for her. Esperanza pressed both hands to her belly, her breathing rapid. I won't let them take my child. I won't. You won't have to, Catalina said, though she had no idea how to make that promise true. We'll. The door exploded inward, the barricade scattering like kindling. 5 men in old bloodline colors poured into the room, led by a commander Catalina didn't recognize. He was huge, scarred, and carried the kind of cold efficiency that spoke of someone who'd killed before and would again without hesitation. "Esperanza de los Santos," he said calmly. "You're coming with us. The pregnancy will be terminated, and you'll be relocated somewhere that won't cause further complications for pack succession. Don't fight, and no one else has to be hurt." "Over my dead body," Catalina snarled, placing herself between the men and Esperanza's bed. "That can be arranged," the commander replied. "But it doesn't have to be. Step aside, Luna. This isn't your fight anymore. Everything that happens in this sanctuary is my fight." The commander sighed, then gestured to his men. Two of them grabbed Catalina, dragging her away from the bed despite her struggles. She fought with everything she had, but they were trained warriors and she was just... The window shattered inward, glass exploding across the room. A figure in silver and black landed in a crouch, and even before he straightened, Catalina recognized him. Rodrigo, not in his formal alpha robes but in fighting leathers, a blade in each hand and fury written across his face. "Touch them," he said quietly, "and you die where you stand." The commander and his men froze. Alpha authority rolled off Rodrigo in waves, the kind of primal dominance that made submission instinctive even for trained soldiers. "My Lord Alpha," the commander tried. "We're acting under orders from... I don't care whose orders you're following. I am Alpha, and I'm telling you that if any Omega in this sanctuary is harmed, I will personally hunt down everyone responsible and make their deaths last days. Am I clear?" 4 of the men immediately dropped their weapons and knelt in submission. The commander hesitated a moment longer, then followed suit. "Catalina," Rodrigo said without taking his eyes off the intruders. "Are you hurt?" "No. But you're Heir." "I know. Felipe got word to me that something was wrong. I came as fast as I could." He raised his voice. "Commander Felipe." The familiar guard captain appeared in the doorway, genuine distress on his face. "My lord, I apologize. The orders that pulled my men away, they bore council seals. You thought wrong. Lock these men up. I want names of everyone involved in this plot. Who ordered it, who funded it, who provided the forged seals. Leave no stone unturned." "Yes, my lord." As the intruders were dragged away, Rodrigo finally turned to look at Esperanza. She was still in bed, arms wrapped around her belly, tears streaming down her face. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I came." He moved closer but stopped short of touching her, as if remembering the distance he was supposed to maintain. "No one threatens my heir. No one. Vicente will claim he was just providing alternatives," Catalina warned. "He'll say these men acted without authorization, that his proposal was legitimate politics." "Let him claim whatever he wants," Rodrigo replied. "After tonight, everyone will know exactly what happens to anyone who threatens this child. Old bloodlines, new bloodlines, I don't care. The succession is settled. Esperanza's child will be the next Alpha, and anyone who has a problem with that can challenge me directly." It was the declaration Esperanza had needed to hear weeks ago. But hearing it now, in the aftermath of violence, it rang slightly hollow. He was protecting his heir, not necessarily the mother carrying it. Still, it was protection, and that would have to be enough. The aftermath of the attack brought swift consequences. 3 council members were implicated in the plot, including Vicente, and stripped of their positions. The men who'd forced their way into Luna House were tried and executed publicly, a brutal message that attempts on the heir's life would be met with equally brutal response. Commander Felipe was formally reprimanded, but kept his position after Rodrigo determined the forged orders would have fooled anyone. New protocols were established, new guards assigned, and Luna House became a fortress in truth as well as name. Through it all, Esperanza remained on bed rest, her body recovering from the shock and terror of that night. The early contractions stopped, the spotting ceased, and by the 6th month, Doctora Jimena declared both mother and child stable. "You're out of the danger period," the old woman said, relief evident in her voice. Barring any new complications, you should carry to full term. Esperanza nodded but didn't smile. Something in her had changed that night, had hardened beyond what Isabella's lessons or Catalina's training could have achieved. She'd looked death in the face and survived, but surviving had cost her the last shreds of innocence she'd been clinging to. "When the child is born," she said quietly one evening as Catalina sat with her, "they'll try again. They'll wait until I'm weak from labor, until the baby is here and vulnerable, and they'll find another way to eliminate the Omega-born heir. Rodrigo won't let that happen. Rodrigo can't stop everything. He's one alpha against hundreds of bloodline families who see this child as a threat to their power structures. Eventually, someone will succeed. Then we make sure the child is too valuable to kill," Catalina said. "Too beloved by the pack, too essential to stability. We build public support, create alliances. We make them human," Esperanza interrupted. "Not an heir or a political symbol. Human. So that when someone tries to harm them, it's not attacking succession plans. It's attacking a child that people care about." It was brilliant in its simplicity, and terrifying in its implications, because making the child human meant making them vulnerable in ways that heirs protected by power and distance never were. "Can you do that?" Catalina asked. "Raise them to be human while also preparing them for the throne?" "I have to," Esperanza said simply. "Because if I raise them to be only a political creature like Rodrigo, they'll spend their life as trapped as he is. Never genuine, never free, never anything but alpha. I won't do that to my baby. I can't." The conviction in her voice was absolute. This 19-year-old Omega who'd been reduced to a vessel, who'd survived assassination attempts and political scheming, who'd lost everything except the life growing inside her. She was going to raise a different kind of alpha. One who knew how to be human, if they survived long enough for that to matter. The 7th month brought Isabella back to Luna House, this time with gifts for the nursery being prepared. She brought a cradle carved from ancient oak, blankets embroidered with protective symbols, toys that had belonged to Rodrigo when he was a baby. "His mother saved these," Isabella explained as Esperanza examined the worn wooden wolf. "Thought he might want his own children to have them someday." She didn't exactly imagine this scenario, but she trailed off with a slight smile. It was the most human Catalina had ever seen the lady, standing in an Omega's chamber, sharing pieces of her mate's history, acting almost like the child's other mother she'd claimed she'd be. "Thank you," Esperanza said softly. "For the gifts, for coming, for not hating me." "I don't hate you," Isabella replied. "I hate the situation. I hate that my mate felt more alive with you in one night than he has with me in 7 years. I hate that I'm barren and you're fertile, and that seems to matter more than everything I've accomplished. But hating you specifically would be exhausting, and I have too many other enemies to waste energy on." "We're not enemies," Esperanza agreed. "We're just two women trying to survive the same man." Isabella's laugh was unexpected and genuine. "Accurately stated. Though I'd add we're trying to survive the system that created him. Rodrigo isn't naturally cruel. He's just been shaped by pack law and bloodline politics until he can't separate his personal desires from his duty. Sometimes I wonder who he'd be if he'd been born a merchant or a farmer instead of alpha." "He'd still be the man who talks about stars," Esperanza said quietly. The women looked at each other, and some understanding passed between them, recognition of shared loss, shared knowledge of the man trapped inside the alpha. "When the child is born," Isabella said, "I meant what I said about being involved. Not to replace you but to help. You're going to need allies in the compound, people who can protect them when you can't be there." "Can be that. I want to be that." "Why?" Esperanza asked bluntly. "What do you get out of helping the child who represents everything you couldn't give your mate?" "Purpose," Isabella answered simply. "I've spent 7 years being decorative and diplomatic, and essentially useless except for the political connections I maintain. This child gives me a chance to matter for something beyond my bloodline. To raise an alpha who might actually change things instead of just perpetuating them." That's worth more than petty jealousy. Catalina watched the alliance forming, two women on opposite sides of pack hierarchy finding common ground in the child between them. It was fragile and complicated and absolutely necessary if Esperanza and the baby were going to survive. The 8th month brought the first real signs of labor, contractions that grew steadily stronger and closer together, unmistakable signs that the child was ready to be born. Doctora Jimena prepared her medical supplies, and Omegas scurried to ready the birthing chamber. Word went out to the Alpha's compound. Within an hour, Rodrigo arrived with half the council, Isabella, and enough guards to defend against an army. He didn't enter the birthing chamber. Pack tradition prohibited Alphas from witnessing the actual birth, but he paced the corridor outside like a caged wolf, his tension evident. The labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of Esperanza's screams echoing through Luna House, of Catalina holding her hand and coaching her through contractions, of Doctora Jimena monitoring everything with the calm competence of someone who'd delivered hundreds of babies. Finally, as dawn broke over the sanctuary, a new cry joined Esperanza's, thin and outraged and absolutely beautiful. The child was here, alive, screaming their fury at the cold world they'd been thrust into. "A boy," Doctora Jimena announced, cleaning the squalling infant and wrapping him in soft blankets. Healthy, strong lungs, all fingers and toes accounted for. She placed the baby in Esperanza's arms, and Catalina watched the young mother's face transform. All the hardness, all the strategic calculation she'd learned, it melted away, replaced by pure wonder. "Hello," Esperanza whispered to her son. "Hello, little one. I'm your mother. And I promise, I'll keep you safe. I'll teach you to be good and strong and human. I'll make sure you know love alongside duty." The baby stopped crying, his unfocused eyes trying to find his mother's face. One tiny fist waved in the air, and Esperanza caught it, bringing it to her lips. Outside, Rodrigo's voice demanded, "Is he alive? Is he healthy?" Catalina opened the door. "You have a son, my lord. Both mother and child are well." The relief on his face was almost painful to witness. "Can I see him?" Catalina looked back at Esperanza, who nodded. Rodrigo entered the chamber slowly, as if approaching something holy. When he reached the bedside and looked down at his son, his entire being seemed to still. "He's perfect," the Alpha whispered. "He's yours," Esperanza replied. "And mine. And his own person who'll grow up to be whoever he chooses. That's the promise I need from you, Rodrigo. Whatever throne he inherits, he gets to be human first." Their eyes met over the baby's head, and for just a moment, Catalina saw them again. Not Alpha and Omega, not ruler and vessel, but the two people who talked about stars at a festival. The connection was still there, buried under politics and pain, but real. "I promise," Rodrigo said. "On my life, I promise." The baby chose that moment to cry again, and the spell broke. Rodrigo stepped back, the Alpha mask settling into place. "What will you name him?" "Diego," Esperanza said. "After my father. Diego de los Santos y Valorosa. Both bloodlines, equal claim. He'll carry all of who he is, not just what's convenient." It was quietly revolutionary, insisting the Omega bloodline be acknowledged alongside the Alpha. Rodrigo hesitated, then nodded. "Diego de los Santos y Valorosa. The heir to the Monte Claro pack." The formal acknowledgement made it real. Made Diego not just a baby but a future Alpha. Made Esperanza not just a mother but the mother of royalty. And made them all targets for everyone who wanted that throne to go to someone else. The first 3 months of Diego's life were eerily peaceful. The baby thrived, growing stronger each day. His personality emerging in small ways. Curious, alert, surprisingly calm except when hungry or tired. Esperanza recovered from the birth and threw herself into motherhood with fierce dedication. Luna House became a fortress nursery, with Omegas taking shifts watching over the young heir, with guards posted at every entrance, with protocols for everything from feeding to changing to who was allowed to hold him. Isabella visited weekly, true to her word. She brought gifts, advice, and something like friendship. Watching her with Diego, Catalina saw genuine affection, this barren lady finding joy in the child she couldn't have herself. Rodrigo came monthly, formal visits where he'd hold his son awkwardly and make stilted conversation with Esperanza. The ease they'd had at the birth never returned. Duty stood between them like a wall, and neither seemed willing to breach it. "He looks at Diego like a responsibility," Esperanza told Catalina after one such visit. "Not a gift, not a miracle, just another duty to manage." "Maybe that's all he knows how to feel," Catalina suggested. "Maybe being alpha for so long has broken the part of him that knows how to love without purpose." "Then Diego will teach him," Esperanza said firmly. "My son won't grow up thinking love is weakness or vulnerability is failure. Even if I have to contradict everything pack law teaches." It was a beautiful goal, and increasingly impossible to achieve. The attack came on Diego's naming day, the traditional ceremony where an heir is formally presented to the pack and given their full name and title. The celebration was held in the Alpha's compound, a massive gathering of every important pack member and allied families. Esperanza carried Diego through crowds of bowing wolves, Catalina and Isabella flanking her like shields. The baby was dressed in ceremonial robes, too small for his tiny body, and seemed more interested in chewing his fist than acknowledging the political theater around him. Rodrigo stood at the ceremonial stone, waiting to receive his son and speak the words that would make Diego's position official. Everything was proceeding perfectly until Esperanza climbed the steps to present the baby. The arrow came from the crowd, fast and silent. It would have gone straight through Diego's heart if Isabella hadn't moved within human speed, knocking Esperanza aside. The arrow buried itself in Isabella's shoulder instead, and she collapsed with a cry of pain. Chaos erupted. Guards swarmed the crowd, searching for the archer. Megas screamed. Rodrigo leaped forward, grabbing Esperanza and Diego, shielding them with his own body as more arrows flew, 3, 4, 5, each one aimed at the baby in Esperanza's arms. But the guards had formed a wall now, their shields deflecting the projectiles. Rodrigo carried Esperanza and Diego off the platform, Isabella crawling after them, blood streaming from her shoulder. They made it to a secured room deep in the compound. Doctora Jimena was summoned, and she examined all three while Rodrigo paced and raged. "Who was it? Who dared?" "Working on it, my lord," Commander Felipe reported. "We've detained everyone in the courtyard. We'll find them." "Isabella," Esperanza sobbed, clutching Diego to her chest while Doctora Jimena worked on removing the arrow from the lady's shoulder. "You saved him. You saved my baby." "Our baby," Isabella gasped through gritted teeth. "I told you I'd protect him. I keep my promises." The arrow came out, and Isabella fainted from pain. Doctora Jimena worked quickly to clean and bind the wound, pronouncing that the lady would recover fully but needed rest. Diego, miraculously, was unharmed, shaken by the chaos but alive in his mother's arms. "They'll keep trying," Esperanza said flatly, looking at Rodrigo. "Every ceremony, every public appearance, every moment we're vulnerable, they'll keep trying until they succeed." "Then we don't give them opportunities," Rodrigo replied, his voice cold with fury. "Diego stays at Luna House until he's old enough to defend himself. No more public ceremonies. No more traditional presentations. The pack will accept him as heir because I say so, not because of pageantry." "That's not a life," Catalina protested. "You're talking about keeping a child prisoner for years." "I'm talking about keeping him alive," Rodrigo shot back. "Which is more than his enemies want to give him." "He's right," Esperanza said quietly, and everyone turned to stare at her. "Diego can't be a normal child. Can't have a normal life. Not when his very existence threatens centuries of bloodline power. We keep him safe, teach him everything he needs to know, and wait until he's strong enough to claim his throne without us." "He'll grow up isolated," Isabella said, conscious again and pale. "Never knowing other children, never experiencing pack life. That's not preparing him to rule, that's crippling him. Then you visit more, Esperanza said. Bring him books, stories, lessons about the outside world. Catalina teaches him about omegas and protection. Rodrigo teaches him about being alpha. And I teach him about being human. Between all of us, maybe he has a chance. It was decided. Diego would be raised in Luna House, protected by its walls and the people who loved him, until the day he could step into the world strong enough to survive it. Years passed. Diego grew from baby to child to young boy, clever and kind despite the isolation. He had his mother's amber eyes and his father's commanding presence, tempered with something gentle that came from being raised by women who valued compassion alongside strength. Esperanza never left the sanctuary, dedicating her life to her son. She aged from 19 to 25, from girl to woman, and Catalina watched her transform into something remarkable. A mother, yes, but also a teacher, a protector, a quiet revolutionary teaching her son that Omega blood wasn't weakness but strength. Isabella visited every week without fail, even after her shoulder healed. She brought Diego books and maps and stories of the pack he'd someday rule. She taught him strategy and politics, softening the harsh lessons with genuine affection. Rodrigo came monthly, and slowly, painfully, learned to be a father alongside being alpha. Diego adored him despite the distance, would light up whenever his father arrived, would hang on every word of the stories Rodrigo told. And Catalina watched it all, this strange family cobbled together from duty and danger and love that none of them had planned for. On Diego's 7th birthday, as he played in the Luna House courtyard with other Omega children, safe behind walls that had become his whole world, Catalina stood beside Esperanza and asked the question that had haunted her for years. Was it worth it? Everything you lost, everything you sacrificed. Was this life worth that one night at a festival? Esperanza watched her son laugh, watched him treat the Omega children as equals instead of lessers, watched him grow into someone who might actually change the pack from within. Ask me again when he takes the throne, she said softly. When the boy who was raised by Omegas and loved by a barren lady and taught humanity by his mother becomes alpha. Ask me then if one night was worth creating someone who might finally make the world different. Catalina smiled. He'll be remarkable. He already is, Esperanza replied. And somewhere in the distance, beyond walls that protected and imprisoned, the pack waited for the day when Diego de los Santos y Valorosa would step into his birthright, the Omega-born alpha who'd learned that protecting the weak wasn't weakness, but the truest strength of all. The Luna had protected every Omega, but one had carried the alpha's heir. And together, they'd protected something more precious than bloodlines or thrones. They'd protected the possibility that love and duty didn't have to be enemies. That strength could be gentle. That an heir could be human. And that sometimes one night really could change everything. If this story touched your heart, tell me the city you're watching from, because we all need a hug after that journey. And remember, the strongest protection isn't walls or weapons, it's the people who refuse to let you face the darkness alone.